The violinists were still tuning when I realized I was standing in my own living room like a polite stranger. Peonies the size of soup bowls crowded the mantel where my grandmother's lake stones used to sit. A chandelier I'd never seen hovered where my reading lamp should have been scattering ripples of cold light across the oak floors I refinished by hand. A planner in a headset brushed past me with a clipboard and a smile I recognized from expensive boutiques. "Guests to the lawn, please," she said, guiding me toward my own porch as if I were there to borrow sugar. On the back steps, the lake looked exactly as it did when I was 10, blue as a promise, a loon calling from the far cove, but my name didn't seem to carry on the wind anymore. A bartender tested the taps under a white sailcloth tent. Cases of champagne hissed as they opened. Somewhere behind me, a door clicked shut, and laughter spilled down the hall I painted last winter, bright and sure, like the house had finally chosen new owners. I kept telling myself this was temporary decor wedding day theater, nothing more. Then I heard Travis's voice from the porch banister, rich with that easy confidence that always got him forgiven. "Welcome to our home on the lake," he told a man in a tux who shook his hand like they'd done this for years. "We're so glad you're here. Our home." The note stuck in my throat like a fishbone. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from down in the comments. And if you've ever been treated like a guest in a place you built with your own 2 hands, tap that like button and share this with someone who'll understand. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next part of this story. But to understand how a wedding toast turned into a boundary I couldn't uncross, you have to know what this lake has been to me and what it cost to come back to it. I am by every practical measure the reliable child. The one who reads the contract before signing and stashes extra batteries in the drawer nobody else opens. At 32, I'm a real estate attorney in Boston, the kind who can tell you where a deed lies to you by how the paper feels. I built my life firm, brick by firm brick, scholarships, side jobs, meticulous budgets, and when I got my first big bonus, I drove north alone to a listing that made my chest go tight. My grandparents' cottage was on the market again, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, and the dock where my grandfather taught me to tie a cleat hitch under August stars. It wasn't cheap. I ran the numbers 3 different ways, called my lender twice, and paid more than I wanted because I knew what I was buying was not only a house, but a promise to my younger self. I signed the papers in a quiet conference room with my hands steady and a knot in my throat. When the keys hit my palm, they made a sound I can still hear when the lake is still the sound of a door that belongs to you and nobody else. Travis congratulated me that first weekend on the dock. He said, "Must be nice to have lawyer money," and laughed like a big brother who was proud and only a little jealous. But he also said, "It's family property, really," and coughed like it was a joke that needed practicing. We grew up 4 years and a universe apart. He was the kind of handsome that made teachers sigh and police officers hand out warnings instead of tickets. Forget to mow. He'd promised to mow twice the following weekend and then charm Mom into ordering pizza. Borrow the car and return it with the tank flirting with E. He'd show up with grocery store tulips and a story about a stranded friend. I learned early to handle my own laundry and to say no thank you without apology. He learned the world would move a chair for him if he looked a little lost. When he met Megan at a gala where people talked more about foundations than the ground they stood on, I thought maybe this was his turn toward steadiness. She came with sheen and posture, and a family whose last name appeared on museum wings. They got engaged in half a year and picked a date in August, the month the lake burns gold at dusk. He called me one Tuesday with a voice full of déjà vu and said, "Shell, we've been looking at venues. Everything's booked or ridiculous. Your place would be perfect, the view, the history, like bringing the family full circle." I had already circled those weeks on my calendar. I planned to swim at dawn and read on the porch and let the back steps collect sand. But he said Grandma and Megan said meaningful, and my mother called to tell me how romantic it would be how my grandfather proposed to my grandmother on that dock. And wouldn't it be something to honor that? Somewhere between my mother's soft insistence and my own soft heart, I said yes. I made conditions professional cleaners any damages their responsibility, my office and personal files off limits, and Travis agreed with the broad nod of a man who has never read a checklist. 2 weeks before the wedding, I met Megan for a walkthrough. She moved through the rooms like a realtor on a commission. "We'll put the bar here," she said, finger grazing the bookshelves in my reading nook. "This furniture will need to go." She touched my grandmother's quilt folded over the sofa with the curiosity you reserve for antiques in someone else's house. "And the master will be perfect for our wedding night," she told her planner, her smile tight enough to creak. "The master is where I sleep," I said gently, like I was talking to a guest in a hotel who'd wandered down the wrong hall. "Of course," she said, and looked past me at the lake. The day arrived cooler than forecast 75, with a loyal breeze that lifted the tent flaps. A string quartet took the porch I painted last spring. Guests came in tuxes and jewel-toned dresses and steadied themselves with the newel post as if it were built for them. I counted heads without meaning to. 100 became 120, became a number the septic would not love. A wedding happens like a tide. The house filled, emptied, and filled again. Toasts rose, laughter traveled. I stood with a glass of ice water and did what good hosts do. Smiled, moved aside, handed napkins to a woman laughing too hard to catch her tears. When I stepped into the hallway to breathe, a woman I didn't know touched my elbow. "It's so wonderful they're starting their life here," she said. "Travis told me this is your family's place. Keeping it in the family so rare these days." I opened my mouth to correct her and found I didn't have the breath. That evening, I crossed to the side bedroom I'd designated as a coat room to grab a wrap as the temperature slipped. The door to my office was ajar. Inside, Travis's voice carried easy lower than usual, a voice he'd use with a banker. "Thank you for the generous gift," he said. "The renovations we're planning will make the lakefront property an incredible investment." "Foundation before expansion," a deeper voice replied, amused and approving. "Megan loves this location. Imagine a proper compound in a few years." An ice-cold certainty slid behind my ribs. I pushed the door gently and stepped away before my shoe could announce me. I stood in the hall with my hand on the frame until I felt the wood under my palm instead of the room spinning. When the music faded and the last sparklers hissed against the gravel, I went looking for my books. The shelves in the living room held frames I didn't recognize and vases I didn't buy. In the garage boxes sat neatly labeled in a hand that wasn't mine. Storage cookware, storage photos, storage misc. I pressed a palm to the cardboard and felt the outline of a leather spine I knew as well as my own name. The plan apparently involved my life being portable. I told myself it would all be undone in the morning. I told myself they'd leave on their honeymoon and a cleaning crew would return the rooms to their right memory. Morning came. The cleaning crew came and went. The master remained closed. A silk robe that wasn't mine hung behind the bathroom door like it had replicated there. Each visit that week, something else had been replaced. A range with a sleek stranger. Simple linen curtains swapped for heavy drapes, the lake stones from the mantel gone like a pocket you forgot to check before laundry day. By Friday, my patience was a cheap sweater with the thread pulled loose. I stood at my office window in Boston and told myself a clear conversation would fix the blur. That's when Jessica Neighbor Doc, confidant keeper of small, watchful kindnesses, called with urgency baked into my name. "Shell, there's a moving truck in your driveway." "Big one. Men are carrying furniture inside. Your brother's on the porch with a clipboard like he ordered the weather." The drive up took 90 minutes, the radio talking to itself while I held the wheel. Pines tightened along the highway like a jaw. When the lake finally opened up glassy, and pretending nothing had changed, I turned onto my road and saw the truck sitting like a verdict, back doors yawning. Movers in blue shirts carried in a sectional wrapped in cling film. Travis stood beside the open door pen, moving posture, relaxed, a man checking boxes at his new address. "Hey, sis," he said when he saw me, as if I'd come early to a cookout. "Surprise. We're getting settled in." Settled in where I asked, my voice calm in a way that made my hands colder. "This is my house. We were going to talk once everything was set up." He reached to put an arm around my shoulders like he was the gentle one, and I was the storm. "Mom and Dad think this makes sense for everyone. Passing the home to the next generation. You're always in the city. Megan loves it here. That's not their decision to make," I said, stepping away from the reach that always asked me to be smaller. My phone rang. "Mom!" I answered because old habits drive before you can set the parking brake. "Sweetheart," she began so sweet it stung. I might have suggested just for a while that the newlyweds base themselves at the lake. "You're so busy. Family comes first." "Mom," I said evenly, "I own this house. I pay the mortgage. You can't gift what isn't yours." "Don't be dramatic," she sighed. "It's a family arrangement." Megan came outside, then her hair caught up in an effortless knot, her smile bright as a blade. "Shelley, we weren't expecting you today. Daddy's helping us arrange the furniture. The new sectional looks perfect in the living room. We had to move your old sofa to make room." Behind her, a man stepped out I recognized from the wedding hand. Like a gavel voice, like a verdict. "James Hamilton," he said. "We didn't properly meet." Travis explained the arrangement. Refreshing, really siblings supporting each other. I walked past them into my house and felt the ground tilt. The living room was a stranger's magazine spread. My kitchen had acquired appliances chosen for photographs, not eggs. In my office, a stack of papers waited like a trap laid for a rabbit that believes in trails. On top, a transfer of property with my name smudged into a signature that almost resembled mine if you didn't know how my R curls. I held the page up to the window. The light came through it like a scream nobody else could hear. Travis stood in the doorway, his face flickering from guilt to that old reliable grin. "Preliminary paperwork," he said lightly. "Nothing official yet." "You forged my name?" I said. I didn't raise my voice. "The lake has taught me that a quiet surface can drown you faster. This is fraud." "Come on, Shell," he said, tone shifting to the slow drawl he used in high school when a teacher asked where his homework was. "You always got everything. Full scholarship, that bonus. Some of us have to make our own opportunities." James Hamilton leaned against the doorframe with the ease of a man who has watched many houses become his. "Miss Reynolds," he said, formal now, "I'd suggest considering the bigger picture. It would be unfortunate if a family disagreement complicated your professional relationships in Boston." They edged in without touching me. Not shoves, pressure, not threats, suggestions. The kind that have toppled more women than raised voices ever could. I looked at the forgery. I looked at the lake through my own window. And then I set the paper down, picked up my keys, and walked out past the moving truck, past the thick curtains that blocked the light I bought, past the porch where a violinist had tuned 3 days ago, past the dock where I learned to tie a knot that's never failed me. I didn't slam the door. I didn't give them that sound. In the car, my hands shook only when I put the key in the ignition. My phone lit again. "Mom." I turned it face down on the passenger seat and watched the porch through the windshield. My brother tucked the clipboard under his arm and laughed at something Megan said. The lake didn't move. Even the loon was silent. I backed out of the driveway I pay for and turned toward the road that runs along the water like a vein. As the trees closed in and the house fell out of view, the quiet in the car grew heavy and strange. like a room after a long argument when the other person has left. In that quiet, a different sound finally arrived, one I recognized from every case I've ever taken to trial. It was the click a lock makes when it meets the right key. And just like that, the house that forgot my name reminded me who I am. The road curved along the water like a quiet witness. Pines leaned close to the car, as if to listen their shadows sliding over the hood in slow, forgiving lines. I drove without music, without the voice of anyone telling me to be reasonable, just the hum of tires and the small tremor in my chest that wouldn't settle. The house had been mine for 3 years, yet in one afternoon, it felt like the ground beneath it had been loaned out without my consent. When the Boston skyline appeared, I exhaled for the first time in an hour. The city's noise felt clean compared to the silence I'd left behind. I parked in the underground garage of my office building and climbed the stairwell by habit, the smell of concrete and stale coffee grounding me. Inside, the halls were still lit, even though most desks were empty. Alexandra's office door was cracked open. Her desk lamp made a pool of amber light across the papers. She looked up as soon as she heard the door. "Shelley," she said, reading my face before I spoke. "I need help." I managed. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Start from the beginning." I told her everything, the wedding, the forged papers, the moving truck. As I spoke, the story sounded impossible even to me. She listened without interrupting, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of her keyboard. When I finally set the document on her desk, she leaned forward and studied my signature through the light. "It's a poor imitation," she said quietly. "But it's enough to cause damage if they try to use it." Her calm steadied me. The lake still echoed in my ears, but the sharp edges of fear began to dull. "We'll stop them," she said. "Tonight we get ahead of this. You're the legal owner. They have nothing but arrogance." Alexandra pulled the property file from the database confirming the deed and mortgage in my name. Then she called Lauren Kim from down the hall. Lauren handled property disputes the way a surgeon handles a tumor, precisely and without sentiment. She arrived in a gray blazer, reading glasses balanced low on her nose, and listened while Alexandra summarized the situation. Lauren nodded once. "We file an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. I'll draft it tonight. In the meantime, do you have security cameras at the lake house?" "I do," I said. "Installed after I bought it." "Good," she replied. "Let's pull that footage. It'll show them moving in, maybe even handling those forged documents." The plan unfolded like a map drawn in confident lines. Documentation, injunction, police coordination. We stayed until well past midnight, the city lights turning the office windows into mirrors. Each step made the air a little easier to breathe. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Travis on my porch, smiling like he'd already won. When I finally left the building, the night was cold enough to sting. I stopped by my apartment only long enough to grab a change of clothes. Sleep would have been useless. My mind played the same scenes on repeat, the signature, the smug laughter, the sound of movers' boots on my floor. At dawn, I met Alexandra and Lauren again. Lauren held a file clipped neatly with a court stamp. "Judge Patel signed the injunction an hour ago," she said. "We have the police meeting us at 8. I nodded. My hands trembled once, then stilled. I'd spent my career protecting other people's property. Now I had to defend my own. The drive north felt different this time. The air had the crisp bite of early morning, and the lake shimmered pale blue between the trees. By the time we reached the driveway, 2 police cruisers were already waiting, their engines idling softly. Officer Daniels introduced herself, steady voice. Kind eyes, the sort of presence that could diffuse a storm before it broke. She studied the court order Lauren handed over, then looked to me. "You'll enter first," she said. We'll be right behind you. My heart hammered as we walked up the path. I pressed the doorbell to my own house, absurdly polite for what was about to happen. Travis opened the door in rumpled pajama pants, his hair sticking up. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face before he masked it with indignation. "What the hell? Shelley, you brought cops." Lauren stepped forward before I could answer. "Mr. Reynolds, this property is owned solely by Ms. Reynolds. You have no legal right to occupy it. Any attempt to alter ownership or residence is a violation of state law and this court order." He laughed once, sharp and hollow. "This is a family matter. You can't just throw me out." "It became a legal matter when you forged documents," Alexandra said. Behind him, Megan appeared in one of my silk robes, her hair wrapped in a towel. Her expression hardened when she saw the officers. "Why are police here?" "Because your husband tried to steal my home," I said quietly, "and I'm here to take it back." Megan's father arrived not long after stepping out of a black SUV with his attorney in tow. His confidence filled the driveway like a gust of wind. For a moment, I almost pitied him. He didn't know the ground had already shifted beneath his feet. Lauren handed the attorney our documents. The man's expression tightened as he read. He leaned toward Hamilton, whispering something that made the older man's jaw set. Travis Hamilton said, his voice low but cutting. "You told me this property was being transferred to you." Travis stammered words, tangling into excuses. "It was going to be." "Mom said." "You lied," Hamilton interrupted. Megan's face went pale. "You said it was a wedding gift," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the word gift. "You said it was already yours." Her father turned to her, weary and cold. "We'll discuss this later, in private." I stood in the doorway, the morning light spilling across the floor, and watched the truth untangle itself like a knot finally giving way. Officer Daniels stepped closer. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, you need to gather your belongings and leave the premises immediately." Travis tried one last time. "Shell, you can't do this. We're family." "Family doesn't forge signatures," I said. Megan threw her wedding ring onto the driveway, the metal flashing once before it rolled into the grass. Her father guided her back to the car without another word. The attorney followed, still holding the folder that proved everything. For a moment, silence fell so thick it pressed against the air. Then Travis turned to me, his face twisted with something between anger and shame. "You'll regret this," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but not as much as you will." He left with 2 suitcases and the last of his arrogance. Watching him drive away, I felt the strangest mix of grief and relief, like standing at a funeral for someone who's still alive. Inside, the damage was worse than I'd expected. The walls were freshly painted in a color I'd never choose, a thin film of sawdust clinging to the baseboards. My grandmother's quilt was gone. The bookshelf I built during my first year as a lawyer had been replaced with something glossy and hollow. Lauren moved methodically through each room, documenting everything for the report. In my office, she found a folder labeled Lakefront Expansion. Inside were notes and sketches stamped with Hamilton Development's logo. Pages detailed plans to turn the property into a multi-unit resort. A ledger tucked in the back listed debts and Travis's name numbers circled in red. "Looks like motive to me," Lauren said softly. I nodded, though my throat was tight. "He was never planning to live here," I said. "He was going to sell it." By noon, the officers had cleared the house. Travis's car was gone, leaving only tire marks in the gravel. Alexandra and Lauren packed up their folders and turned to me. "You did everything right," Alexandra said. "Now you can breathe." I stood at the window overlooking the lake, the reflection of sunlight trembling on the water. For years, I'd imagined that view as peace itself. Now it looked different, wider somehow, like the horizon had shifted to make room for something harder and truer. After they left, I walked through each room slowly. The air still carried traces of their perfume and cologne, faint ghosts of intrusion. I opened windows one by one until the scent of pine drifted in. Outside, the breeze moved across the lake with the steady rhythm of something that had seen everything and forgiven nothing. I found a box near the garage marked storage photos. Inside frames were jumbled together my parents' wedding picture, a photo of Travis and me at the lake, as children my law school graduation. Some glass was cracked, but the images survived. I sat on the floor and wiped the dust from each one. The air was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing and the soft hum of the refrigerator that hadn't yet been replaced. Late afternoon light warmed the floorboards as I locked the last window. The house felt both empty and honest again. My phone buzzed on the counter, Mom calling. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Oh, Shell!" She began, her voice already trembling. "What have you done? You've turned the whole family upside down." I leaned against the counter, watching the lake through the glass. "No, Mom," I said. "I just turned it right side up." There was a pause, long enough to hear her breath catch. She started to speak, but I ended the call gently before she could start another round of excuses. When evening came, I sat on the dock with my feet in the water. The boards creaked the same way they had when I was a kid, but the sound felt different now, like they were learning my weight again. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called out its cry, stretching over the water in a long, hollow note. I didn't cry. I just sat there until the sun dropped behind the pines and the first cool wind of night reached the shore. The lake house stood behind me, change-scarred, but still mine. And for the first time in years, I let the silence settle without trying to fill it. In that silence, I could feel the beginning of something not peace yet, but the shape of it forming quiet and sure, waiting for me to step into it. The lake was still when I woke, its surface smooth as slate beneath the early light. A heron stood near the reeds, patient and motionless, as if the chaos of the week had never touched this place. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and pine. I moved quietly through the house, touching each wall, as though reacquainting myself with an old friend. The silence was different now, not heavy, not hollow, but aware. On the kitchen counter, my phone blinked with 3 missed calls from my mother. I ignored them for a while, pouring coffee and standing by the window where the sunlight hit the floorboards in a stripe of gold. When I finally answered, her voice carried that soft, trembling tone she used when trying to smooth things she couldn't fix. "Shelley," she said, "I don't understand how it got so far. He's your brother." I stayed quiet for a moment, watching a ripple move across the water. "He's also the man who forged my name," I said. She sighed, the kind that comes from years of avoiding truth. "He made a mistake. He's ashamed." "No," I said gently. "He's been rewarded for every mistake he's ever made." This was different. She started to cry, and I closed my eyes. I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table of her smaller house, outside Worcester tissues already piling beside her teacup. "You can't stay angry forever," she whispered. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm protecting what's mine. There's a difference." We stayed on the phone longer than I expected. The conversation was soft, but firm, the way waves meet the shore without giving way. When we hung up, I felt lighter, though I knew she still didn't understand. Some lessons were years in the making. That afternoon, my father drove up from the city. I heard his truck before I saw it, the sound steady, familiar, like the rhythm of someone who never rushed to conclusions. He stepped out carrying a small box and a paper bag of groceries. Inside the box was a new door lock, set the kind with reinforced plates and brushed metal handles. "Figured it was time," he said. We worked side by side without much talking. He held the screws while I drilled, then checked the hinge alignment with the ease of a man who'd fixed things his whole life. When we finished, he stood back and looked around the living room. "You've done well for yourself," he said, almost to himself. I nodded. "It's just a house," I said, but he shook his head. "It's a line in the sand," he replied. We ate dinner on the porch as the sun went down the sky, a slow burn of color fading to ash. He told me he'd called Travis once, but hadn't said much, just that he needed to make things right. "He's not good at taking responsibility," my father said. "But I think this time, he finally knows what he's lost." The next morning, I started making lists, repairs, replacements, small restorations that might bring the house back to itself. There was something healing in the order of it. I called a contractor about reversing the paint colors, another about restoring the old fixtures. Every call, every plan felt like reclaiming a piece of ground that had been quietly taken. Jessica stopped by later with a basket of muffins. She stood on the porch, looking past me into the living room, her face soft with concern. "I can't believe what they did," she said. "I saw the movers that morning and thought maybe you'd decided to rent it out." "I almost wish that's all it was," I said. She laughed lightly, not because it was funny, but because she understood the absurdity of it. "If you ever need someone to keep an eye on the place again," she said, "you don't even have to ask." For the next few days, I let the rhythm of normal life return. I worked remotely from the home office, still half empty and scattered, but I liked the quiet hum of purpose returning. At night, I walked the edge of the dock, listening to crickets and the water lapping against the posts. There were moments when anger tried to rise again, but I let it pass. It didn't belong here anymore. A week later, an envelope arrived from the county courthouse. Inside was confirmation of the finalized injunction and a statement that the forged document had been formally entered into evidence. I tucked it into my safe beside the deed, closing the door with a sense of finality that felt deeper than any courtroom ruling. That same evening, my mother called again. "He's been asking for your address," she said softly. "Tell him to write." I answered. A few days later, he did. The letter arrived in his careful handwriting, the same loops and slants I remembered from when we were children. It wasn't long, and it wasn't what I would call an apology. He spoke of debt, of desperation, of how he convinced himself that I owed him a piece of the comfort he'd never earned. Reading it, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness. There was something almost childlike in his attempt to explain the unexplainable. I placed the letter back in its envelope and slid it into a drawer I rarely opened. Maybe one day I'd answer. For now, it was enough to know I didn't have to. Work called me back to Boston eventually. My colleagues treated me as they always had, though Alexandra and Lauren watched me with a certain protectiveness that comes from walking someone through the fire. They were kind enough not to bring up the case again, except once, when Alexandra caught me staring out the window during lunch. "You handled it with more grace than most people would have," she said. "I didn't feel graceful," I told her. "That's how grace works," she replied. "It's not about feeling calm. It's about not losing yourself when everything around you does." Her words stayed with me. When I returned to the lake the following weekend, the house greeted me with its familiar scent, coffee grounds, pine, and the faint trace of the soap my grandmother used. I opened all the windows, letting the breeze move through the rooms. The repairs were nearly finished. The walls had been repainted, the furniture restored. The only thing left was to choose what to do with the empty space in the corner where Travis's ornate mirror once hung. I decided to leave it bare. Some silences deserved room to breathe. As the season shifted toward fall, I found myself spending more time on the porch, working with my laptop and a blanket across my knees. Friends visited on weekends, filling the house with laughter that sounded nothing like the noise of that wedding day. Sometimes my father came up to help with small projects, fixing a loose step or trimming the trees near the drive. My mother came too, eventually. It took weeks of gentle persistence, but one crisp Saturday she pulled into the driveway with a nervous wave. She brought pie and apologies in equal measure. We sat at the kitchen table for hours, the air thick with things unsaid, until she finally spoke. "I should have stopped him," she said. "I thought if I smoothed it over, it would end quietly." "But it never does it?" "No," I said. "It just teaches people how much they can take." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. "I'm trying to change," she said. "I started seeing a counselor. She says I need to stop confusing love with rescue." That was the first time in years I saw her own reflection without excuse. We didn't hug right away. We just sat there, letting the truth rest between us. It was enough. By October, the lake turned cold, and the trees along the shore began to burn with color. I spent long evenings by the fire reviewing cases or reading the kind of novels my grandmother used to lend me. Life settled back into its quiet rhythm, and for the first time in a long while, that rhythm felt like peace rather than escape. When winter came, snow gathered on the porch railings, softening every edge. I found myself standing at the window, more often watching the frozen lake catch the morning light. It was in that stillness that an idea began to form, something that connected the lawyer I had become to the woman who once sat on this same dock with her feet in the water, dreaming of security. I wanted to help others protect what was theirs. Not just houses or deeds, but the sense of safety that comes with knowing your life can't be quietly taken. That thought settled deep inside me like an anchor. It wasn't yet a plan, but it was the first spark of one. When spring returned, I drove to Boston early one morning and met Alexandra for coffee. We sat by the window of a quiet cafe watching commuters rush past. I told her my idea, a pro bono program at the firm dedicated to helping individuals facing property disputes and fraud, especially those manipulated by family or trusted partners. She listened, her expression thoughtful. "That's ambitious," she said. Then she smiled. "But it sounds like you." By the time I left the cafe, the air felt different, warmer, cleaner, full of purpose. I drove back to the lake house with the windows down, the wind moving through my hair, the road unwinding like a ribbon ahead of me. The past still lived here, yes, but so did the future. And as the house came into view through the trees, I realized it wasn't just home anymore. It was proof, quiet, solid proof, that the life you rebuild on your own terms can stand taller than anything anyone ever tried to take from you. The water glittered under the afternoon sun, as if the lake itself was nodding in agreement. I parked, stepped out, and felt the ground steady beneath my feet. The wind moved through the pines with a low, familiar sigh, carrying the scent of earth and rain. I stood there a long time before going inside, listening to the sound of belonging return. By the time the first lilacs bloomed along the back fence, the idea had taken root. I spent long evenings at my kitchen table with files spread across the wood, drafting the outline of a program that would offer free legal aid to people caught in the same quiet traps I had barely escaped. Property disputes, forged signatures, family arrangements that were never real agreements at all. Alexandra helped me refine the proposal. We met in her office most nights after everyone else had gone home, 2 lamps burning over a sea of papers. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose, scanning my draft. "You want it to stand on its own?" she said. "Separate budget, independent vetting. If we're going to call it pro bono, it has to be watertight." Lauren dropped my coffee in hand. "Name it something that feels human," she added. "These cases start with property, but they end with dignity." I wrote those words down in the margin and underlined them twice. Dignity. That was what I had fought for, not just the deed, but the right to be treated like my life was not a loan someone else could collect. We presented the proposal to the firm's partners in early May. I still remember the faint hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of legal pads as they skimmed the materials. When the vote came, it passed unanimously. They wanted me to head it. "You've lived it," Alexandra said afterward, smiling. No one else could lead this better. The first few months were steady but quiet. Most of the clients came through small referrals, widows with contested titles, siblings arguing over farmland, elderly men tricked into signing away homes by relatives they trusted. I met each of them with the same patience Lauren had once shown me. The work was hard, but every case felt like placing another brick back into the foundation of something I had nearly lost. By summer, word spread. Local news ran a short piece about the initiative, and soon donations started arriving, small checks from strangers' envelopes with notes that simply read, "Thank you for doing this." The support touched me in a way I hadn't expected. I began spending weekends hosting free legal clinics at community centers. The first Saturday, only a handful of people showed up, but one of them, a retired teacher named Marion, stayed after everyone left. She told me her niece had tried to take her home through a fraudulent deed transfer. She was frightened, unsure of what to do next. We filed the paperwork together. 2 months later, she sent a handwritten card, "You gave me my home back," and with it, my peace. That card stayed pinned above my desk long after the case was closed. One evening, as I locked up the office, my phone rang. My mother's number appeared on the screen. I let it ring once before answering. Her voice was softer now, careful, as if she had finally learned that silence could be kinder than insistence. "Travis sent another letter," she said. "He wanted me to ask if you got his first one." "I did," I said. "He's in a program now. Gambling addiction counseling, they call it. He asked me to tell you he's sorry, though he knows it doesn't change anything." I sat on the bench outside the building, watching the city lights shimmer on the windows across the street. "I hope he means it," I said quietly. She hesitated. "He's different, Shelley. For the first time, he's not blaming anyone else." "Then I hope he finds a way to live with that," I replied. We talked a little longer, not about the past, but about small things, her garden, my father's fishing trip, the way the weather had finally turned warm enough for short sleeves. When we hung up, I felt something subtle shift inside me. Forgiveness hadn't come, but the anger had thinned, stretched out by understanding. The following week, Alexandra called me into her office. "You're due for some recognition," she said, handing me a glossy envelope. Inside was an invitation to the State Bar Association's annual awards dinner. They wanted to honor the firm's new initiative. At first, I wanted to decline. Public events still reminded me of that wedding, smiling faces, polite applause, hiding private schemes. But Alexandra insisted. "This isn't about them," she said. "This is about the work." So I went. The dinner was held in a hotel ballroom overlooking the harbor. The chandeliers reflected on the glass windows, and the sound of silverware against plates filled the air. When they called my name, I walked to the podium, feeling the weight of the moment more than the eyes on me. I spoke briefly about boundaries, about justice that starts at home, and about the quiet courage it takes to say no to the people you love most. When I stepped down, people stood to clap. I saw Lauren near the back nodding with pride. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me near the coat check. She looked nervous, her voice trembling slightly. "Ms. Reynolds, she said my sister used your firm's program. She was about to lose her home after her ex forged her signature. You saved her. I just wanted to say thank you." Her words settled deep in my chest. For the first time, I realized how far the ripples had spread. When I returned to the lake house that night, the moonlight lay across the water like a ribbon of silver. I kicked off my heels, set the award on the counter, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of damp wood. Somewhere across the water, a porch light flicked on Jessica's house. She waved once, then disappeared inside. I stood there for a long time, remembering the chaos that once filled these rooms, the voices that tried to drown out my own. They were gone now, replaced by something gentler. The wind in the trees sounded like quiet applause from the world itself. In late August, a letter arrived, not from Travis this time, but from Megan's father, James Hamilton. His handwriting was precise, his words formal. He wrote to acknowledge the damage caused by his involvement, saying he had been misled but still bore responsibility. He offered to reimburse the cost of repairs made after the attempted takeover and to donate to my legal initiative. I read it twice before setting it aside. His money couldn't buy absolution, but his acknowledgement was something I hadn't expected. I donated his check to the program's fund, requesting it be used to support cases involving elder exploitation. That evening, I called my father. He sent a donation, I said. He chuckled dryly. People with money always try to balance the scales with paper. At least this time, it's paper that helps someone else. The weeks slipped into autumn. The house grew quieter, but not empty. Friends came to visit, staying in the spare rooms, helping me build new memories that softened the old ones. We cooked, told stories, and watched the water change colors with the season. One Saturday, as I was raking leaves near the porch, my mother's car pulled into the drive. She stepped out holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. Her eyes searched mine before she spoke. "Travis wanted you to have this," she said. Inside was a photo of us as children sitting on the dock, our feet dangling over the water. Beneath it, a note in his handwriting. "You were right. I was wrong. I hope you can remember the good parts too." I placed the photo on the mantel beside one of our grandparents. For the first time in years, it didn't hurt to see his face. That night, I sat by the fire, the flames reflecting against the window pane. The house felt full again, not with noise, but with meaning. I thought of all the people whose lives now brushed against mine because of that one terrible week when I almost lost everything. Sometimes pain doesn't vanish. It transforms. Before going to bed, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, the kind that made you pull your sweater tighter. Across the lake, the trees had turned to copper and gold. I could hear the faint call of geese moving south. The lake house stood solid behind me, no longer a reminder of betrayal, but a testament to survival. The line between what was taken and what I reclaimed had blurred into something steady, something strong. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered a quiet thank you to the house, to the water, and to the version of myself who never gave up. The wind carried the sound away, soft as a secret. In the distance, a light flickered across the lake, a reflection I couldn't quite place. It shimmered for a moment, then disappeared, leaving only stillness behind. But even that stillness felt alive, waiting for whatever came next. Morning mist drifted over the lake like breath against glass. The water was calm, smooth enough to mirror the clouds that hung low and pale. I stood barefoot on the porch steps, a mug warming my hands, and listened to the hush that comes only after a long battle is over. The world hadn't changed, but something in me had. I could feel it in the steadiness of my heartbeat, in the quiet space my thoughts finally made for peace. Inside, the fire had burned down to embers, a faint red glow pulsing through the ash. I hadn't stirred it yet. I liked watching it fade slowly, as if the house itself were resting. On the table sat the photograph my mother had brought the week before Travis and me on the dock, our legs too short to reach the water. I'd placed it in a wooden frame carved with small leaves, the kind my grandfather used to whittle when he had nothing to fix. The first snow of winter had fallen the night before, softening the edges of everything. The dock was a white silhouette, the air sharp with pine and cold earth. I was supposed to drive into the city later for a board meeting about expanding the legal program statewide. Alexandra had called last night, her voice bright with pride. "You realize, don't you?" she said. "This has grown bigger than the firm, bigger than all of us." I'd laughed softly. "It started with one house," I reminded her, "and one boundary," she added. She was right. Every case we took on every person who walked into our office clutching forged papers or eviction notices reminded me of that first line I drew in the sand. Saying no had once felt like losing family. Now I knew it was how you kept yourself whole. A light knock at the door broke my thoughts. When I opened it, Jessica stood there bundled in a green scarf, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "Thought you could use breakfast," she said. I smiled, stepping aside. "You know you never have to knock." She shrugged. "Old habit. Besides, it's polite." We ate together at the kitchen table, steam curling above the coffee mugs. Through the window, the lake reflected a rising blush of pink. "You ever think of selling this place?" she asked after a while. I looked around the smooth oak counters, the shelves filled with small reminders of where I'd been. "Not anymore," I said. For a while I thought about it. I wanted to leave everything that reminded me of them, but this house isn't about them anymore. It's about what survived. Jessica nodded, breaking her muffin in half. "It suits you now. It's steady." After she left, I gathered a few files into my satchel and drove into Boston. The highway shimmered with melted snow, and the sun rose like a soft promise above the horizon. I passed familiar turns, old coffee shops, and the courthouse steps where I'd once stood trembling with a folder clutched to my chest. Those memories didn't sting anymore. They were part of the map that brought me here. At the office, the air buzzed with quiet energy. Our reception area now had a small plaque near the door, the Reynolds Legal Initiative Property and Dignity Defense. Beneath it, a line read, "For those finding the courage to reclaim what's theirs." I hadn't chosen the inscription. Lauren had surprised me with it. In the conference room, Alexandra and a few colleagues were already seated. She looked up as I entered. "Ready for your presentation?" I smiled, setting my notes on the table. "As I'll ever be." We discussed budgets, partnerships, and community outreach. When the meeting ended, Alexandra lingered behind. "You've built something that will outlive all of us," she said. "How does it feel?" "Peaceful," I said simply, "and a little unreal." She leaned on the table, her expression soft. "It's real. You turned pain into purpose, Shell. That's rare." Later that afternoon, I drove to meet my mother at a small cafe halfway between the lake and the city. She had insisted on buying lunch, her way of showing effort without words. She looked better, lighter somehow. Therapy had given her something I never could, the understanding that fixing someone else's mess wasn't the same as love. She smiled when I walked in, standing to hug me. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I answered, and for once, it was entirely true. We talked for nearly 2 hours, mostly about ordinary things. The neighbor's new dog, my father's latest fishing trip, her attempt at watercolor painting. When I got up to leave, she reached for my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly. "I never gave up," I told her. "I just waited for you to see it clearly." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She only nodded, pressing my hand once before letting go. That evening, as I drove back to the lake, a golden haze spread across the hills. The snow had melted into glittering patches, and deer grazed near the tree line. When I reached the house, I paused by the mailbox. Inside was a single envelope, unmarked except for my name. The handwriting was familiar Travis's. I stood by the porch light as I read. He wrote that he was sober now, working construction in Maine, paying off debts one piece at a time. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He only hoped that I was well, that I kept the lake house, and that maybe one day when it didn't hurt, we could sit on the dock again, the way we did when we were young. I folded the letter carefully and carried it inside. Instead of filing it away, I placed it in a drawer beneath the photograph of us as children. Maybe someday, I'd answer. Not yet, but someday. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Sunlight spilled through the windows, touching every corner of the room. I brewed coffee, fed the small chickadees that visited the feeder, and settled at the desk overlooking the water. There was a list waiting on the screen, names of clients approved for the new grant. Each one represented a home, saved, a boundary restored. Outside, the lake glimmered like polished glass. I opened the door to let the air, in the cold, brushing against my skin. A faint breeze lifted the curtains, carrying the scent of wood and frost. I walked out to the dock and sat at the edge, my boots resting on the damp boards. The world was quiet, but not empty. The kind of quiet that makes you realize peace isn't something that arrives, it's something you allow. A pair of ducks skimmed across the far end of the lake, their ripples spreading wide before fading back into stillness. I stayed there a long time, thinking about everything the last year had given and taken. I had lost a brother, yes, but I'd gained something steadier, a sense of self that didn't bend for anyone else's comfort. Sometimes I still heard echoes of the old chaos, like distant thunder on a calm night. But it never reached me. Not anymore. When I finally rose to go inside, the sun had climbed high, turning the snow along the shore into a field of diamonds. The house waited behind me, warm and quiet, filled with the scent of coffee and pine. I turned once more toward the lake, letting the light fall across my face. Some wounds don't fade because we forgive, they fade because we finally let go. If this story spoke to you, tell me where you're listening from down in the comments. And if you've ever had to stand your ground to find peace, share it with someone who'll understand. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about quiet strength and second chances. Until next time, may your boundaries hold, and may your peace stay yours.